Welcome to this week's What's for Dinner video. My name is Ashley. I'm going to be showing you 3 different meals I made this week. I don't always follow recipes exactly, but if you are interested, I've linked some similar recipes down below. The first dinner I'm going to be showing you, I just made some creamy chicken pasta in a white sauce and bow ties. So I'm starting off with about 1.5 chicken breast. I just butterflied one of the chicken breasts in half, and now I'm just seasoning it. I just used some hot wing seasoning, some paprika, and some garlic salt. I'm just going to make sure that both sides are nice and coated. I use paprika mainly for the color. I love the tint that it gives chicken when it's cooked. So I just have a little bit of oil in a pan heating up. I have it on about medium high, and then I'm just going to cook these chicken breasts all the way through. So I'm going to let this chicken cook a couple minutes on the side, and then once it is nice and brown, I'm just going to flip them and put a lid on it. I like to put a lid on the chicken when I'm cooking it just to make sure it cooks all the way through, but also to retain all of that moisture. So while that's cooking, I'm going to get started on my vegetable. I'm just going to use what's left of my green beans. I'm going to just season them. I drizzled a little bit of oil on top, and then this is some Cajun seasoning and some garlic powder. So I'm just going to give that a nice mix, and then this will go in the oven at about 350 degrees. Now to work on my sauce. So I just removed all of the chicken, and now I'm using all of the bits that was left over, all of the juice, to add that to my sauce. So I'm just pouring in some heavy cream. I don't measure anything, sorry, but I am just going to pour in the heavy cream, and then I'm going to season that. I use some Cajun seasoning and some garlic powder. So I'm just going to mix all of this together and then bring it up to a simmer. Once it's at its simmer, it should start thickening up. This is where I just added a handful of some cheese. It is just some quesadilla cheese. I just wanted it a little bit cheesy. I'm just going to turn the heat down. I'm going to let the cheese melt, and the sauce should thicken up and reduce. So while this was cooking, I just went ahead and boiled some pasta, and I also chopped up my chicken. I'm just going to add all of that to the same pot. So I'm going to start with the noodles. So I'm just going to mix this all together, and then I'm going to add my chicken. So this chicken rested for about 10 minutes, and then I just chopped it up. This was so good. It was so juicy and flavorful. So I just mixed it all together until everything was nice and coated, and this is how everything looked when it was done. This next meal was my easy meal of the week, but so good. I made the Trader Joe's orange chicken. I made the spicy noodle package, the black, and just some pot stickers. So I decided to try out cooking the Trader Joe's orange chicken on the skillet. Normally I just put it in the oven and then transfer everything to a pan to coat the chicken. But today I just wanted to see how it would taste to do it on the stove top. So I just put in a little bit of oil, and this is basically how I cooked it. I just kept putting the lid on top to make sure the chicken was getting cooked inside. I think it did crisp up really nicely. I think it maybe took a little bit more effort than cooking it in the oven, but it was still very, very good. So I just poured in the sauce packets and mixed it all together, made sure everything was nice and hot, and then I just put a lid on it and started working on the ramen. These are just some frozen chicken pot stickers that I had going as well. So I just made one package of the ramen. It is pretty big. It's bigger than a normal ramen package. If you know me, I am obsessed with spicy noodles. I do eat them for fun. They are so good. So then everything finished basically at the same time, and this is how everything looked when it was done. This next meal was inspired from Pinterest. It is called fire roasted enchiladas. I didn't follow the exact recipe, but it is where I got my idea from. So I'm just starting out with my Mexican rice. This is how I always make my Mexican rice. I am just using 1 cup of white rice into some oil. You want to let it get toasted. I am adding 1 teaspoon of garlic salt, 1 teaspoon of cumin, and 1 teaspoon of onion powder. I'm going to mix that all together and let the flavor start to cook, and then I'm going to be adding half a can of tomato sauce, so about 4 ounces of tomato sauce. So I'm going to mix that all together, and then I'm going to add 2 cups of water. To that, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of tomato bouillon and 1 teaspoon of chicken bouillon. So I just turned my heat back up, and I'm going to mix this all together, make sure everything is well combined, and then you want to bring this up to a boil. Once it reaches its boil, you put a lid on it and turn it back down. So I'm going to get started on my enchilada filling. I just drained some corn and some black beans. I just have it on a skillet with a little bit of oil, just cooking up and getting warm. So I already cooked about 2 chicken breasts and shredded them up, so I'm just going to add that to the same pan. That I'm going to add about 1 cup of chicken broth that I just made up. The shredded chicken should absorb all of this liquid and cook down. And then I just added some seasoning, so I'm seasoning it with some taco seasoning from Costco, some onion powder, and some cumin. I'm just going to mix this all together, let it start cooking down, and then I'm going to add a little bit of the enchilada sauce that I'll be using. This chicken was so good even by itself, and once I took it off the heat, I just added in some shredded cheese. So I'm going to get started assembling my enchiladas. I just warmed up a couple corn tortillas. I'm just going to add a little bit of filling to each tortilla, and then I'm just going to fold it and plop it in the dish. These corn tortillas were a little bit more drier than I would have liked to make for these enchiladas, but once everything was together, the sauce was on top, the cheese was on top, you couldn't even tell. So once I finished assembling the enchiladas, I just drizzled a bunch of sauce, whatever was left over, on top of the enchiladas, made sure everything was nice and coated, that way it could bake and become nice and soft in the oven, and then I just topped it with a bunch of cheese. So I had a little bit of enchilada sauce left over that I didn't want to go to waste, so I just drizzled it on top just to add a little bit more sauce. This went in the oven at 350 degrees until everything was nice and bubbly and melted. These were so good. I will definitely make these again. This is probably my favorite enchilada dish, and then this is just the Mexican rice. This is how everything looked when it was done. Thank you so much for watching this week's What's for Dinner video. Make sure you come back next week for another one.